The Discourse starts right now with Cheryl Oates and Erika Barootes.
Welcome back to The Discourse. Today, we are going from old Didsbury Three Hills to across the Atlantic and covering everything in between.
We're going to be covering the G7 summit, which just wrapped up right here in our own backyard, the ATA's ballsy strike threats, and ending our show with some by-election predictions as polls close on Monday.
Okay, so we're going to start with teachers. Erika is very interested in talking about sort of like why unions exist, why they do what they do, and why we're in this current position where teachers have overwhelmingly voted to strike. And school could be out, like it's almost out for summer. It could be out for much longer in these conditions. So just a bit of background on this before we sort of jump into it. Alberta teachers have sent a pretty strong message to the province that they've had enough and they are willing to strike across the province if they can't reach a deal. This is the height of a negotiation that has been going on for quite a long time now. So here's a bit of the backstory. For months, the Teachers Association and the Teachers Employer Bargaining Association, or TEBA, have been going back and forth trying to hammer out this deal since their previous deal expired last August. Last month, after the parties reached an impasse, a mediator stepped in to recommend a settlement, which 62% of teachers rejected, despite their executive recommending that they support it. And following that vote, teachers across the province voted very overwhelmingly. 39,000 teachers participated and overwhelmingly voted 99% in favor of strike action. So now, from that date that they made that vote, they have 120 days to initiate a strike as long as they give 72 hours notice. And it's worth noting, school is expected to start again within that 120 days. In the meantime, they will go back to the bargaining table this week, June 19th and 20th, to keep working with the mediator and potentially avoid having teachers walk off the job.
Yeah, so we've been hearing about this back and forth, bringing in the mediator, all of things which didn't happen to this level for nurses and doctors in their negotiations. So I sit here and think that like the ATA, I don't know how they justify like this level of ask or the pushback that they're giving. The province, I believe, has actually shown respect for teachers and school leaders. You saw the extra $405 million for operational upgrades in the budget. And there is actually a pretty solid deal on the table for those that aren't listening, which is a pay increase of 12% over 4 years. So 3 year over year, which is exactly the same deal, actually, as we saw the Union of Nurses, United Nurses Association, or United Nurses of Alberta, accepted. Plus, they got another 5% through grid harmonization and extra incentives for those in the north and for substitutes. So, like, I just don't know what else they can be asking for that they're pushing back so hard. So it's actually a surprise that there was such an overwhelming support for strikes. But yeah, I'm interested to hear how you think we got here, because I think that they're just asking for far too much and putting the livelihood of children's education on the table by threatening to strike.
And I think they'd say the same thing about the government. Like, basically, the teachers are coming to the table saying this isn't just about wages, but wages are part of this discussion. This is about capping classroom sizes. This is about proper supports for schools. This is about classroom complexity, making sure that kids who need extra attention get that extra attention. And Alberta, across the country, is the lowest funded jurisdiction per student in the country by far, by like 16% below the national average. And it has been for a number of years, basically since the UCP came into power. And so this isn't about like today, we have one issue today that you've, fallen short on this particular deal. This is the teachers saying, like, since you came into power, we have like taken it and taken it and taken it. We feel like we're holding up the entire education system and we just can't do it any longer. And a 12% increase to wages is not going to fix all those problems. And so they've shown a huge united show of support amongst themselves to say, we are so committed to this. 99% of teachers in Alberta voted that they're willing to walk off the job. And that is a signal to the government that they are united. That's a really strong negotiating position. They are united. They're not going to be moved by a 12% wage increase to say, we're going to continue to push because we think we can do better.
And so the big thing for me is, and maybe my biggest problem with unions at this level, don't get me wrong, trades, I understand why you have unions if you're putting your life on your line. I worked for a utility company and saw like the challenges that those people do being on a power line. I believe that there's purposes and places for unions, but to have something like this where I'm like, you're not coming to the table with a solution. You're only coming with a problem, and your only proposal to this, it's like, do we think that class sizes should be smaller? Absolutely. Do we think that we need more supports for children with learning disabilities? Absolutely. But throwing money, giving money straight up into the problem, to me, isn't part of the solution. I would say, why do we have 3 children that need EAs in a classroom and putting all of the kids together when the gifted ones can continue? It's the middle kids that are, average that aren't getting the support they need. Like the structure of how school's taught right now, you're laughing, but like I have 2 kids in the system. It's an absolute fucking joke. It's an absolute joke. But okay, Cheryl, so they have changed from students being in, different levels, or if you have special needs, you're in a different program, you're getting those hands-on supports. The ratio of teacher to student is higher because of that. And then you have school situations where an average classroom is dealing with a pretty close cohesion of a learner. And so you do have the ones that can excel and learn on their own. Then you have individuals that are, within the school system, they might need a little bit of help. That's where the problem is. Those students and the other ones aren't getting help because in a classroom, you have a teacher and maybe an EA or 2 that are dedicated to students, but it makes that the whole class is distracted. The whole class isn't able to teach, and no teacher can teach 30 kids, even if it was 20 kids when 4 need double the attention. Like, why are these kids all in the same classroom? Why isn't ATA proposing how we structure classrooms, how teachers and EAs are working together instead of saying we need more money? I'm just getting so sick of, like, even in the healthcare system, it's like you can't throw money at a problem to fix the problem that isn't a solution.
But in this case, I think you could, because we're talking about massively, massively underfunding Alberta's education system, where we're 16% below the national average, the lowest funding per student in the country. So some of the problem, I'm sure there are structural changes that can be made. I am also sure that the people who are experts working within the education system are the best people placed to make those changes. But first of all, they need the resources to support the system that they already have. And they don't have classroom caps. They don't have supports in the classroom. They aren't getting paid what they think they should be for their jobs. Like, this current system is not sustainable. And that's basically what they're saying.
I don't disagree that I think our public school system is broken. Like, we have 1 kid in Catholic and 1 in public, which are both publicly funded, night and day on the amounts of PD days. Like, I don't know how much these teachers, like, they should all be experts in 17 things. And like, it's not designed for people, like, parents can't take every one of these days off. Like, there's a huge impact on parents for teachers getting PD days. You and I both worked in the private sector where, like, you don't get those. You do them on your evenings and weekends. So we have a challenge with how it's operated, the time that is spent in classrooms. We also have challenges with, like, and I'm not sure with the per capita funding per student, how that's impacted because of our number of charter. And I actually don't know this. So if you do, let me know. But like, I think some of the impact of the calculation is impacted and differently skewed than other provinces because of the fact that we also have a high number of charter and independent and private schools. So I don't know if that actually impacts what we are compared to other jurisdictions. But either way, I think we can also say we've had a huge influx of population. This government has invested more than any other government in building new schools, but that doesn't happen overnight. I feel like this whole thing comes back to what I see as a parent and as like someone, as a taxpayer. I see it as like, give us more money, we'll solve the problem. And I really don't think that's going to solve the problem.
So, like, as a parent, I hear that you have a lot of gripes, like personal gripes, like you don't like PD days, you don't like this, you don't like this. But like, that is not what this negotiation is about. The negotiation is between the teachers and the province about how the system moves forward and how we keep teachers from walking off the job. And
right.
so
But for them to get more money, and they don't work very hard. Like, they do a great job in what they do. But I also don't think it's fair to say you get 12%. Like,
But this
I don't
is the
even
problem.
understand
If
how
you
a
start from
teacher.
a place, if you start from a place of saying like, well, teachers just don't work hard. They don't deserve this. It's not a fair negotiation. We shouldn't even be talking about this because teachers don't work hard. Like, that is a terrible place to
Well,
even
not the
think
government.
about. I know, but that, like, I mean, I'm sure there are people that share that view of like, teachers don't work hard. We shouldn't be investing more. The education system is broken. Like, of course, you're not going to reach you're not going to reach a settlement that way.
No, but I
and
think it's
teachers
really.
feel that. Like, they're saying, like, from a starting point, we want respect. We want to be
Okay, but-
respected. We want to be paid well. We want our classrooms to be properly funded.
Okay, and fair. But then tell me how you can justify that you deserve 12% or more when a nurse isn't getting better than that. Like, I don't understand how they
the
say,
starting
like, we
points are
want
different.
more.
Of course, like, I mean, they're not apples to apples. The starting points are different, and the teachers aren't asking for 12. They're asking for a lot more because they're basically saying, you haven't increased our wages. They haven't kept pace with inflation, and we would like to keep pace with inflation.
Okay, but both of us operated through, like, I feel like it's like this sense of entitlement right now because I was in teacher negotiations where it was frozen. And then in the fourth year at 2%, you were very similar when you were there with Notley. Like, those were freezes. So why are they shitting bricks when they're getting 3, 3, 3, 3?
Well, because you just underlined all the years that they took zeros.
So like, what does that say, though? It's like, for the NDP, who's supposed to be the people that the ATA loves, didn't give them an increase. Like, at the same time, oil in both the times we went through it was not ideal. It is not ideal right now. We don't have a bunch of money. It's not like we're having this huge surplus and able to have the reason why we can't dole the money out.
But
like,
that's
to me,
not-
it's just
I
like,
mean-
why now? Like, it seems like and also, like, how do you think you're more important than a nurse? Like, this is
But
where I'm like,
they're
I
not-
struggle with that.
You can't compare one negotiation to the other. They're from different
Well,
starting
they're all
places.
getting the
They
same
have different
deal,
issues.
or all propose the same deal. And also, nurses didn't get $405 million extra for operational. That doesn't include all of the new schools that are
also
capital.
not comparable. Like, that's not the same thing. You can't say like, oh, well, the education system is dramatically underfunded. It gets 400 million, and the nurses would also look for 400 million for the healthcare system. You couldn't even do that because the government has blown up the entire healthcare system.
So you're saying that they shouldn't be treated the same, or it's not apples to
No,
oranges because they're both. I think we can both agree.
They're not the same systems.
both
They don't have the same problems.
not great.
They don't have the same history. So that you can't say, well, what worked for one will work for the other.
I don't think that's fair to say, because I think like a lot of the argument is on affordability and freezes, and they've had a lot of the same history. So I don't agree with you that you don't think that they're at least comparable, or you could sit here and say, like, if these teachers truly care, then knock off 1% and allocate it. Ask for it to be allocated towards like some of the things you need. Like, I just don't see, my biggest frustration is like, it doesn't seem like that these unions, or in this case ATA, same with AMA, like, there's clear problems. Not discrediting it. I'm not saying it's teachers' faults or doctors' faults or anything. There's problems in our healthcare and our education system. Where my frustration comes is like, all that you ever ask for is more money. Why don't we go to the root cause? But they are. They're asking for more money for themselves, more money for the classroom, more money per student. What are they offering as like a constructive solution? Maybe it is how the classrooms are structured, putting caps on classrooms or moving children that need more help out so a teacher can actually perform their duties.
But in
maybe
most
not
situations, that would be a different decision-making body, and it wouldn't be a part of this.
Well, it is part of it
negotiation.
because they're looking at price per student. This is how, like, again, I think it's like, so you ask for a bunch of money and then say, oh, just kidding, we'll deal with this later. We'll go fix the problem.
You can't like put a bunch of conditions and say, we'll only bargain with you if you change the whole way that education is delivered. Like, that's not.
No, I'm not saying
a
the
part
whole
of the
way. I'm
bargaining
saying,
process.
what are your solutions to deal with our huge population growth? What is your solution for dealing with the fact that we have classrooms where we have students?
When you have huge population growth, you need more money. Like, that's obvious.
And they've given more. They've given record funding in education.
They need record funding in negotiation. It's still,
but they also gave an addition for operational, not capital. So
and
I
it's
don't
the
know,
lowest in the country.
But you think that we just pop up and build a school overnight? It takes 5 years to build a school.
I'm not talking about building schools. I'm talking about funding per student into the education system. Lowest in the country by 16%.
And I'm saying, I don't think that calculation is crossed by jurisdiction because of how our our educations. Like, I think that one's not apples to oranges. I'm not saying it's not the lowest or it's not somewhere at the bottom of funding, but I'm saying, like, it's really hard to hear you say, you can't compare nurses collective bargaining to teachers when you're saying I'm comparing freaking Ontario that has, and even BC. BC has Catholic schools aren't funded in the same way our publics are. So it's like that's apples to oranges for me on like
No.
what our cost per pupil is.
No. Okay. We're talking about public education funding. It's the lowest in the country. That is comparable. How much do you spend per student in the public healthcare system or public education system? Sorry. That is
So they're
comparable
asking for
across
more money
jurisdictions.
per student, but they're not willing to compromise anything. Like,
Well, I mean, that's what you go through when you go in bargaining, right? It's like, what are you willing to compromise?
right,
What are
but
you willing
they're
to back
not
down on?
compromising. They're just saying no. They had to bring in a mediator because this was so toxic.
And the executive recommended that the membership accept that, and the teachers basically said no, like 66% or 62%.
This is the funny
said
thing,
no.
though, is like we have a lot of teachers in our family, and I know like it's not equaling the, I can't say that it like transfers, but there's a lot of teachers that actually think that what was put on the table is pretty fair.
Well,
The
not the
difference
majority.
is, right, and I'm not saying the majority, but I'm saying like the interesting thing is that there's so many teachers with really good ideas of how to address this, how to like, the other thing is I don't think that this is creating a constructive relationship. Like, again, I'm just like, come with a solution. Come with like, you know what? We do need to cap X classrooms, or we need to allocate X amount of funding to here, or we need more EAs to be funded because of this. Like, I think that one of the challenges is, and where I think a lot of people like me see and are very frustrated with teachers, is because of a lot of these other things. Like, teachers don't pick PD days. PTA does, or the public school systems do, or they're like their school trustees or their school board. Sorry. Like, there's lots that I think to an average parent see that like 12% seems pretty damn good. And so maybe the thing is like, here's the lump of money that we're going to be able to allocate. We're in a frickin' $5.4 billion deficit. Like, there's no more money to be found. A lot of, and we talked about this in our budget episode, a lot of the allocation, there was actually a collective bargaining line that was pissed me off because of how high it was. That was to deal with this potential cause of where our unions and where our collective bargaining was headed. And so for me, I'm like, it just is so frustrating. And this is where I don't get why unions exist, because it's really sometimes not for the members, but it's for the interest of like, let's see how much money we can get out of these people. And I'm like, if they get this, I expect them to turn this shit around. I expect for every student that has been impacted by COVID, that has been impacted by learning, that isn't like PATs just happened for grade 6 and 9, like, to me, that also heavily, heavily falls to the teachers, because I think it's like absolutely ridiculous that you're not coming with a solution. You're just coming with like more money, sir. Like, it's that's what's frustrating for me. And I think a lot of people feel that way because they have to leave work 4 times a month to go pick up their kids early because there's another PD day. I don't think that teachers are doing any good for themselves right now with how the public's portraying them.
But I mean, we'll see, right? Like, this is why, and some of it comes down to like, yes, some of it doesn't matter what you and I think, because it's going to be a negotiation between the government and the union. And some of it comes down to how will the public interpret this, and what does that mean for the way, like, whether the government feels pressure or not. And so, like, the teachers have voted to go ahead with a strike. Should they decide to do that? Should these next rounds of negotiation fail? That could happen like start of September. They could decide to strike right as kids are supposed to go back to school. We saw this in Ontario. We've seen it in other jurisdictions. We've seen it in Alberta, in previous iterations of this. But obviously there's a lot of pressure, and parents want those kind of issues to be resolved really quickly. Like, they want their kids to go back to school. And so who will wear the brunt of that? Will the teachers wear that, or will the government wear that? And some of this will be what has happened, how the rhetoric has looked over the last 6 years in the lead up to this.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I'm looking at this from like the PR side, I actually don't see this playing well for teachers because of how we've seen this roll out. They have appeared, and again, I'm obviously heated about this topic, but like appeared to not be collaborating. I think that when people look, and regardless of how you feel about what the nurses got and what teachers are getting, like, the narrative is that they're both getting a good deal for their raises. And I know that's only a part of it, but like, I think it's going to come down to who's working in the best interest of the kids. And like I said, many who had disruptions during COVID, like this is a big group of that same cohort that really got a short end of the stick on their education experience. And then again, like all of the other things that the government has given this year, I think it's going to be really hard for the teachers to be given the victim card here. I think it's going to push back, especially when it's like you have all summer, all of these things, and now September. Like the conversations that I'm having, most of my friends are conservative, is I can't believe that they would strike. Like that's ridiculous. And so, and it's less.
And
So
I think
we'll
there
see.
is
But like, I think,
I think there is another side to that. Like, I think the teachers can be quite effective in pushing the message that, like, yes, we were offered raises, but this isn't just about raises. This is about the quality of education that your kids receive. And we are the lowest funded in the country, and we want the government to step up there. And if they lean into that message, like, if you're a parent and you hear, like this is the lowest funding in the country by this much, I think that seems like a fair thing for the Teachers Association to push for. And so
and we'll
if
see,
they
we'll
can
see
lean
how
into
they
that,
align their narrative, because
then
I mean,
the government ends up looking like the bad guy.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, I don't think from a teacher's perspective, and maybe even government, like doing this over the summer gets as much traction as maybe it
But they're
would.
not, right? Like
Yeah.
this is September issue.
Right, but I'm saying like to drive the narrative over the summer of what's happening next, or to get that message out is going to be more difficult until it's an issue in September and parents are in crisis. So we'll keep watching that. I think that they have, another timeline that we'll be keeping our eye on, but I just don't like the ATA. So with that,
really, I did not get that from what you just said there. I was wondering.
I just don't see the purpose. And like sometimes I always question, is it the mandate of the members, similar to AMA? I'm like, is it the for the front line, or is it for the organization itself?
But just before we move on, 99% of teachers,
That's
99% of teachers who are members voted for this, despite the fact that the organization, the executive, recommended that they take it. They voted against it. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. So in later notes, on my social media feed this week and from friends posting, I've seen like a lot of my friends that do hikes and trail runs post when they're in Kananaskis area, and almost being like, can you spot the sniper? Can you spot the security? And like guys are in camo all across Kananaskis. Probably now that I say that out loud, they might have not wanted to have people post about that. But I digress because it already happened. But anyways, I think it's cool that we have like this level of delegation here, this level to showcase both our beautiful tourist attraction, our beautiful province. But I also think it was like kind of crazy to see how many dignitaries and security and staff and all of the logistics that had to go into making G7 Summit a thing.
This is really nerdy, but I love following flight radar.
Oh my gosh.
Like, what do you scroll when you're in bed at night? I scroll flight radar.
TikTok?
So,
I do my Duolingo, actually.
It's an app that you can look at like what planes are in the sky, where are they going, what altitude are they flying at, and watching, because there was a no-fly zone over G7, but watching, like looking to see like the Air Force plane, the U.S. Air Force plane, like circling, and then an unidentified plane also circling in a smaller circle. It's like, I wonder where the leaders are right now. But anyways, it was kind of cool. It felt like very important.
Oh my God, I can't believe that you do that. I have a lot of friends that do it. I just I just think it's funny because I'm like, oh, I don't want to. There's things I just don't want to know, like things in the sky, like aliens or something.
There's also an app where you can look at the boats, like what's in the water at any given time.
Yeah, we did that when we were in Panama. Is like watching all the boats come in and like their timing. So, but that was like in a moment in time. It wasn't like my Saturday night, which now I envision is what you do.
Not just Saturday, every night. I don't need TikTok. I have Radar 24.
Okay, so do you want to give now that we think you're a big nerd, and I bet you there's going to be people that are like, I do that too, Cheryl, in the comments.
Seriously,
do you want to give
just
us?
Before, there's also a Facebook group. There's a Facebook group called like Radar 24 Plane Spotters or something like that. And you can go in and see like who else is looking at the planes I'm looking at and what are they talking about and what's interesting. Also,
do you get new friends on Facebook? Do you like add them and be like, hey, I saw you on the nerd site?
I do not contribute. I am just longtime creeper.
No time contributor. That's too bad
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
Whew, okay, give us
so-
a little wrap up or summary.
Okay,
of
so the G7 just wrapped up. Big topics were, of course, global security, economic resilience. In a sort of move away from what they have done in the past, the leaders released 7 joint statements, much briefer than previous communiques, on things like the challenges with AI, on a critical minerals action plan. They talked about wildfires. They talked about migrants. They also touched on the Middle East and recommitted to peace and stability in that region. And basically, it was all about working together on today's biggest issues, as long as Donald Trump was supportive of moving those issues forward.
Were you hinting at one that wasn't talked about, maybe?
Well, there was lots of things that weren't talked about,
Yeah.
but I think it's like strategically for Mark Carney, like how this was all about, like, can Mark Carney guide this to go well with a really volatile leader? And so picking, like, let's just do 7 short statements that we can all agree on, rather than try to like do a whole joint communique that, the last time around Donald Trump unsigned on Twitter from his plane on the way out. Like, how do we avoid that disaster? So it was different.
They're like, we'll just roll out one and see what he does, and then roll out another. So it's like 7 for the G7.
Yeah.
And so, we were talking before we started filming about some of them. My favorite, because I think it's a really important issue, is the countering migrant smuggling. So that's like human trafficking and what they're going to do to enhance security protocols. In it says like follow the money to basically, see if there's large corporations or anything behind it. So I don't know. I thought that one was the best one. Half of them I don't really understand, like on AI for prosperity versus vision for quantum technologies.
Oh, woo.
I'm like, the computers.
Yeah, I think it was quite strategic. Like, this was like watching Mark Carney sort of like deal with all these personalities, watching him with like, the world is watching Canada host this. What comes out of the G7? What are the sidebars in the G7? What progress can be made? And like, another test of leadership for him. I think he really did look like a statesman. And I know you'll disagree with this, but like watching him, I could not picture Pierre Poilievre doing that.
I could picture Pierre. I think he would have a different, maybe more sidebars, maybe more tone or style for sure. Like, I don't think that he, to me, seems as maybe like the stoic or statesman naturally that I think we have learned to see from Carney. The person that I'm so glad isn't there is Justin Trudeau. Think of how these used to go over, where it was almost like we were made fun of, we were mocked for this. I'm just happy that we're not like an international joke. And so I actually think that, Mark Carney, I don't love his politics. I don't love his party, but like, I think he did well for Canada and in such a critical time. Now, I know that the criticism of him is going to be, because he said a lot of great things, is how he actions this and that relationship with the president of the United States and some of these international relationships that we'll see coming out of it. I do want to give my girl Danielle a shout out, because she was there to greet them. She was there to have meetings after meetings in Kananaskis. I think that she was doing the hustle that we saw her do south of the border and the early new year. But yeah, so she had put out a statement. And so like, if anyone's questioning what narrative she was driving, she was super consistent in how she was meeting and what she was doing. She put out a statement before leaders arrived, and she greeted them and said, like, we are the 4th largest oil reserve and 9th largest natural gas reserve on Earth. We are one of the most reliable and secure energy providers in the world. No other democratic ally offers the same combination of stability, proximity, and abundant energy reserves that Alberta has. And we have no plans of slowing down. We're increasing productions and reducing emissions with advanced technology and strong environmental standards, while protecting Alberta's land, water, and air for future generations to enjoy. I also like that she mentioned in her statement, like, the cinematic opportunities, as we've seen that really grow over the years. AI innovation, which obviously was in one of their statements. Tourism, couldn't have picked a nicer place in Alberta to welcome everyone. And then lastly, the $17.5 billion in agri-food industry that we have. So I think that, like, obviously there's some one-on-ones from all of those, but I thought that her message was actually really strong and good for Alberta, and had a lot of those alignments of don't get it from Saudi, get it from us kind of mentality of having those conversations with international leaders. So I'm going to give her and Mark Carney an A on their handling the G7 summit.
Wow. And Mark Carney gets an A too.
Well, I would give Danielle an A and Mark Carney an A minus.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Is there
Because-
anything besides ideology to that?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
Okay.
I was just like, they can't be the same. But yeah, I thought they both did well for, again, we'll see. I think that Mark Carney's mandate now is higher and
Yeah,
what
I
we're
mean,
going to do. But
He had a lot more like riding on this. Obviously, the
totally.
stakes were a
But
lot
hers
higher
was
for
like
him.
an added bonus for Alberta.
It was almost like, I mean, they were playing two different games. Mark Carney had a big, like a weight on his shoulders. Can he pull this off? Can he, manage all these personalities? Can this be a fruitful conversation and can it end without controversy? Danielle Smith was like, all of these massive world leaders are in your province. What are you going to do with this opportunity? And I agree. I think she did the most with the opportunity that she possibly could, knowing that she's not actually a member of this meeting. Like, what do you do if you're just like the greeter or just on the sidelines? Like, how do you leverage that into something else?
Yeah.
And I think she did a good job.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like she could have just been like, hello, get off your plane. I'll shake your hand, welcome you to my province. But she's like, I am going to be there. You're not going to forget about me. If you take anything away, it's like Alberta oil, like crude, LNG, minerals, agriculture. Like, you want it, we got it. So I think she put the hustle in where he had to. Now, the bar was low on being a great representative for Canada. But I think Mark Carney raised to that. I think he showed that like you can take Canada seriously and we have stuff to offer. Was that your cat? No, you don't have. Do you have one cat still?
I only have one cat now.
Okay, that's weird. You have a ghost, probably. Yeah, I mean, Mark Carney had a lower bar as like, what should the Prime Minister of Canada do given his predecessor? But I do think he stepped up and, acted like the host. Do you see, like, and I've never been to a G7, but like, do you see his role being any different as his first tenure as Prime Minister than if he was a guest as a host?
Yeah, I mean, like if the G7 over these past days of meetings had been like utterly disastrous, if Trump had walked out and, refused to sign, if, you had seen, people disagreeing at the meetings, if the communiques that were coming out or the joint statements looked a lot different, I think the host wears some of that responsibility. Like it's his job to sort of like manage the meeting. He got to invite whoever he wanted to invite. If it goes disastrously, it's on Mark Carney. And I think he proved that his years of sitting in these really, high stakes, high stress positions, like he is a good negotiator. He thought about a lot of the pieces that would come into play to make this a successful meeting. And he probably most importantly managed the personalities around the table and the personalities of those additional world leaders that he invited. And that's tough to do.
Well, yeah. And so, and for those that maybe didn't watch, like Trump left early. He had a situation in his situation room that he had to leave for. But again, like if I was Mark Carney, I'd be like shitting my pants being like, oh my gosh, what if he's going to get on his plane and tweet and be like, this was so ridiculous.
Yeah. But I mean, they did make a statement before he left saying like he's going to attend the dinner and then he's got to go just because things are escalating in the Middle East. And, he kind of said like, sorry, I wish I could stay, but this is kind of like a big deal.
Yeah, but how many times has he said normal stuff and then done something crazy? So
totally.
I would still be like, until
but this is the win, Erika. He said normal stuff and he didn't do anything crazy so far.
Maybe Carney's the Trump whisperer. Who knows?
Maybe. So far, so good. And I think like having a sidebar and having conversations about like moving forward Canada's trade negotiation with the US and setting a time limit on that, whether that's an arbitrary deadline or not, at least there's something coming out of this meeting for Canadians that Mark Carney is, the guy pushing. I think that's really beneficial for him as well.
Yeah. I feel like there was a lot of pressure because like Carney has just taken office. He's new. He's now hosting. But I think that it was actually very good timing given Canada's situation and the economic challenges that we're facing to really put us on an international map, whether it be that our tourism industry seems appealing. We're just being talked about and on people's radar around the world. I think as a Canadian, it's beneficial to have our brand out there and not be the brand that we had for 9 years.
Yeah.
Even if it's
and I think Mark Carney's brand was strengthened by the meetings too. Like Canada's brand, but also Mark Carney's brand.
Yeah. You haven't seen a lot of pushback from really anyone on his performance. Again, I think that all the critics are just waiting to see what happens, but he's so far so good. And like, he's not really new to the job anymore. So let's just get that pipeline to Prince Rupert and everyone will be smiling.
You know what, though? Like that on the pipeline, it feels like
Mhm.
that conversation has evolved a bit even since last week.
Last week.
Like you have Alberta and Saskatchewan now coming out, not saying pipeline, but saying corridor,
Mhm.
which is a much easier thing, I think, for BC to come to the table and have a discussion about.
Yeah.
Where if we're talking about like energy or electricity transmission, or we're
Mhm.
talking about roads, or we're talking about pipelines,
Yeah,
whatever it
rail.
is,
Yeah.
it's a much easier conversation to participate in. And you have seen that rhetoric move for them over the
Yeah.
last week.
So this is what I asked you last week. Is it like an easier pill to swallow from corridor? But I do think that the let's get pathways is probably politically easier based on whatever, if you're progressive. However, I also think that the silver lining of Trump's tariffs were that we don't have corridors and that we don't work collectively and that we don't import export from each other or have interprovincial trade that we should have. So I think that was also maybe paving the way for these corridors. See what I did there? Very funny.
Nice.
Yeah,
Good
you're
one.
like ignoring me. I'm like, but I do think that definitely is helping this conversation because we can only really go up or west,
Yeah.
east.
Well, I mean,
Either way,
if
we'll
the
take both.
conversation continues, that's a win for Danielle Smith.
Mhm. Yeah,
Even
I
the
think
conversation
it's
continuing.
yeah. Speaking of wins for Danielle Smith, our last topic is all the by-elections that she's just gonna sweep across,
yeah?
taking Edmonton, Strathcona,
Uh-huh.
yeah, Olds, Didsbury. Okay, so what are your predictions?
Okay, so we have 3 by-elections: Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills,
Mhm.
Edmonton, Ellerslie, and Edmonton, Strathcona.
Yep.
The NDP are incumbents in both the Edmonton seats, and the UCP are the incumbent in Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills, which was recently vacated by Nathan Cooper as he heads off to his new job in DC. Like, I think Strathcona is pretty solid. Like
The
you
signs for Nenshi are like, yeah, like
Yeah.
I haven't seen many. I know Darby's working hard. I might go out door knocking tomorrow. Just to get the sense, like sometimes I just like to know what's
I would
like the
I would look
doors are
forward
like.
to this report back in
Yeah.
Edmonton, Strathcona, which
Yeah.
like for anyone who's not following Edmonton, this is like the heart of NDP support in Edmonton and was formerly Rachel Notley's seat.
Yeah. And is federally NDP and the only one now in the province. So it is a very progressive area.
Yeah. The next Edmonton seat is Edmonton Ellerslie, which was Rod Loyola's seat, which he left hoping to run for in the federal
Shame.
election. Oh, that was so New Democrat of you.
Shame.
And he didn't end up running, but the seat is vacant now. This one I think seems boring, but is really interesting to watch because some would have you believe that the UCP is making incredible inroads in Edmonton. And if they are making incredible inroads in Edmonton, that should be reflected in the result in Edmonton Ellerslie.
You're like setting us up for failure.
But it's not a urban, like it's not a city center seat. This is like, where the only part of the city that's not considered northwest is like south of Ellerslie, right?
Yeah.
So this is like a suburban seat. This is theoretically where if the UCP is making progress in Edmonton, you would see, whether they win it or not, you would see progress in that result. So I think it is telling whether the polls will be reflected in that seat.
So
and then
go on.
I think the NDP is still like pretty solid there, but I will watch that one with interest.
Do you think that the NDP keep it? So I'm obviously assuming that you're saying Strathcona goes NDP.
Yeah, I think the NDP keep it. But like we'll see. That one's obviously not as much of a stronghold as Strathcona is.
Closing the gap, like say it is that, because I think that the NDP will keep it. But a win for us on the UCP side would obviously be getting the seat, but even a win of closing that gap, like you said, sends a message. And that's not, Edmonton Ellerslie is not one of the 6 or 5 that I would pick, that I would focus on, that are more likely to go UCP in the next election. So if they gain there, do you see that as a loss for the NDP, or would the NDP see it that way?
No. I mean, a win is a win. Like we all know that a win is a win.
Right. But like if you close, it's way closer than you ever anticipated. Like, does that mean they're going to have to shift their focus?
Like, I don't think shift your focus, but as you move toward the next election, obviously it's all about allocating resources. How much can you do to shore up that vote before the next election so you don't have to make an effort to keep that seat in 2020, whatever year we go to this election? And then, of course, Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills could be interesting. I haven't seen, I don't know what the doors are feeling like, but the Republican Party of Alberta, the leader is running there, hoping to get a seat in the legislature. I think the only seat in Alberta that has ever had a separatist representative. So
Well, he's not
that
elected.
could be interesting.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, like the
unelected.
hypothetical. Yeah.
No, there has been a separatist representative there in years ago.
Oh, prior. Yeah. Okay. What I've heard, and that's where I might be election day, is that they're like not really present. Like I said, I think that they would be happy with 20%. And I don't know if I even think that they would get that today. So I'm going to say 14% of the vote, just to throw a random number out there. Like I said, I've just asked people that have door knocked or what the sentiment is. And they're like, I don't think the brand is even knowledgeable. I think some people are like, the what? The Republican Party? Like what kind of it? Like what a joke? Like you're kidding me, or is that serious? Again, I think the UCP, however they got there to have Tara Sawyer as the candidate, like she's a good candidate. There's not a lot of pushback. So, I think that they hold it. I'm going to say that it's a win for the UCP and Ellerslie if they can gain some momentum. But I'm never going to say that that's an area where it's ethnic politics and it's very different type of a campaign than what you're going to see in Edmonton, Strathcona.
Okay, so here's your question back to you.
Okay.
If the Republican Party get 20% in Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills, what
do I chug a
message
beer on the podcast?
What message does that send to the UCP, and how does that change the way you organize for the next election? Yeah,
I don't even know if it does change it. Like 20% isn't much. I think that this is the heart of, and they're running off of like COVID stuff. And the further we get away from COVID, the longer I think that's not an issue. And then the second one's separatism. And again, if the Premier and Mark Carney continue to have positive conversations and we move away from that, I actually just think it takes all the air out of their sails. So unless there's another big thing that could motivate kind of more of a fringe party, I actually don't think it's the same as maybe what the conversation in Ellerslie is, because they're two common parties.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I hope the Republican Party do well. Not well enough to like hold a seat, but
I chug a beer. Did you hear that? I said I chug a beer on the podcast.
I'm looking forward to that as well.
I chug on it. I'm good at it.
There's a number of seats in Alberta where if a third party pulled 20%, the NDP would be sitting pretty well coming up the center.
Yeah. If we saw like a PPC more organized, like a brand that's more known, but in like Alberta level, or we saw the Alberta Party come back, now that might hurt the NDP as well, a more centrist party. But no, I feel like this is so like an issue du jour party that I just don't think that they'll continue on any type of momentum, especially if they're not quite successful here.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. Like everything has been so volatile. They also like the idea that an upstart party like the Republican Party could compete with the UCP that has infrastructure in place and institutions in place to be, a big government party like that. The level of organizing just isn't comparable. Like that, it's hard to compete with that if you're an upstart party. So the idea that they could win that, I think, was always a long shot. But how well they do or how much percentage they pick up will be telling.
Exactly. And that's what I mean. It's not about winning. It's about what message or what force does the message hold. And again, I think it's lower than what they had aimed. Like, I think they were probably hoping for 20 to 30, and I'm giving them half of that or just over.
Well, I just can't wait to see. Okay. Is that it?
I think that's it. That's a whole nother week for us. So next week, we'll cover over were our predictions right? Who are the new 3 MLAs that will go to the legislature? Cheryl's going to be maybe excited. I would love if Nenshi lost, but I don't think that's happening. But I just think it would be really funny. And then we'll also talk about, as we've always learned in Alberta, there's international and national and provincial stuff always happening. So we'll cover that. But in the meantime, so you don't miss it, make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
And remember, new episodes drop every Thursday morning at 5 a.m. And you can also find us on Instagram and TikTok. And we will see you next week. Bye.
The Discourse is hosted by Cheryl Oates and Erika Barootes. Follow on Instagram at The Discourse Pod. Subscribe to The Discourse on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.